Okay, we're already late. I apologize for it. There was a fire in the cafe or something like. No, I'm just kidding. I apologize. So our sixth panel, we have with us, and now I hope I will not be phonetically too experimental. It's Ovidiu Tichindeleanu. Is it?
Wow, yeah.
Gaspar Miklos-Tamastovki, this is the way to pronounce your name, and Madlen Nikolova. So as you will have seen from the abstracts, we are now dealing with the Romanian and Bulgarian situations. Of course the question is, I mean, we all know that there is a certain institutional framework which pushes us to a certain extent towards including, to broadening the concept of the region. This is the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, of course, the Belgrade office being responsible for not only for former Yugoslavia but also Bulgaria and Romania. But this, of course, is not neither the sole reason nor a sufficient reason to include the ex-Yugoslav space with the Bulgarian or Romanian experience into one concept, even if it is as diffuse and as undetermined as the region. So what would be the initial, I would say, what would be the basic legitimation? Well, if you look at the historical trajectories of the Yugoslav, the former Yugoslavia, and compare this, of course, with Bulgaria and Romania, we see that at least historically, since after the Second World War until the coming down of the Berlin Wall, this one could hardly speak about a common experience. The Yugoslav case was a very specific one, while of course Bulgaria and Romania and Moldavia have been integrated into the Soviet bloc. And but the irony is, of course, both have their own version of the socialist project or experiment. But the irony may be that it is precisely now, that is after the fall of the Berlin Wall, that we can really start to discuss things in terms of a region more than just arbitrary geographical description, but a common experience with a very similar structural outlines, both in the economy, the political orientation towards the West, and so on and so on. So, and based on that, maybe it is also time to not only acknowledge this analytically, but also to try to develop it, to see it as a chance to really develop. Something out of which maybe there could at one point, out of the start of communication within the region, and based on this common experience, the left could also maybe be one of the facilitators of forming something that is maybe within the constellation of the European Union a new bloc, a potential bloc, and the left, I believe, has the responsibility at least to consider that option. So that would be my introduction, and now we haven't discussed the succession. Who wants to go first?
He will go because he has the PowerPoint.
Oh, he has the PowerPoint. Good, a very good argument. Okay, since you have the PowerPoint.
How do I do with the...
Well, then we change.
Okay, all right.
So, Ovidiu.
Then let me first show before we go into the... there was that remark yesterday about I'm gonna be the only one having a PowerPoint now. Everybody has been doing it. I also decided to do it. Can I go online?
Yes.
All right. I just want to show quickly so this is the Kritika Tak platform, which, long story short, has begun as a common front uniting different leftist platforms in Romania, and then has become something of a daily. And this is thus far integrated in Kritika Tak, but we're expanding, we're migrating it outside, leftist, which is an initiative that we started with the idea of precisely in that direction, going towards developing a regional international, a different mode of thinking about internationalism within the former Eastern Bloc. And we started by having this meeting first in Bucharest with groups from Bulgaria, Hungary, Ukraine, Russia, and Poland. And then the dialogue continued in Bulgaria this summer. And there's an editorial group for now. But this is just at the beginning, right? And this will be the platform of is already the platform of this initiative, right? Okay. Now I'll just go. I'll try to be very shortly, like around 20 minutes, if possible. We'll see if that works, because it never does. But the idea is, I'd like to give a little bit of background, because most of the discussions have been focused on the former Yugoslav front, so I think there's a need for a little bit of just a sort of like informational background, right? One of the constants that keeps coming up in all kinds of discussions within the, let's say, Romanian left is this annual survey, which has been done since 1990 onwards in Romania, and which asks the same question: was it better before or now? And invariably, usually about 60-70% say that it was better before. And that didn't change throughout the transition. Of course, the questionnaire also asks, would you like back those times? And the same, almost as the same amount says no. But there's something there, right? What you see here is the ceremony of becoming a pioneer, through which I also passed in, I guess, the same time as the author of this drawing, who's Andrea Kirika. She's also basically my age, and she produced just now a comic book retelling the story, the life experience of 1986, seen from her eyes, the eyes of a young pioneer in '86. And so it's the book itself. I think it's very important because it starts telling the story of the recapturing or reclaiming the story of the past, including the present, and we'll come back to this issue. Now, the grand narrative that the context which I want to refer to is, of course, what is called post-communist history. Basically, you see here sort of ideological posts. Basically, all these series have been ways in which this transition and its necessity have been presented to the people as something that has to happen. But the actual meaning, of course, has not been as much an opening as an enclosure, right? And you can see it institutionally. That's the way I try to see it, along sectors. First, military and security, the NATO integration after the war, the peaceful integration in NATO after the war, the Frontex development, once the European borders have been abolished, the most powerful security force has been created too. Frontex has its headquarters in Warsaw, and there's actually two huge EU security forces which defend Europe in its global sense, naming they have ships going through on the coast of West Africa and North Africa. Now, the integration at the level of the political structures, first in the Council of Europe and then in the European Union. Then at the level of economical structures, of course, you have the reinstitution of relations with World Bank, IMF, WTO, but also the very important influence of the global financial accounting companies, which have been actually the ones through which all the aid and all the financial flows from the west to the east passed through. And the integration through the civil society, which we call the formal civil society when we refer to this side of the story, which, well, if you want, we can talk more about this. We can also see it as a financial transition towards dependency. You all know October '89. There was Romania paid with all the heavy price. It's the external debt. Ceausescu flew to Iran, and then something happened. And right now, the debt is this number, $100 billion, is contested. But there's no official number being given anymore. So that's why this is from October 2012. So that's in 20 years, right, this debt being created. You can also see it, this history of our recent foundational history in terms of the production of poverty. And this here I use the data of the others. So you can see clearly the production of poverty, the drop in the real wage value, the destruction of industry, and the destruction of any forms of exchange. Then, of course, we have the production of elites. And here we can talk not only the production of elites in financial terms, I didn't put here, but also in terms of cultural visibility. What I'm referring to is the gradual dissolution of the many newspapers and outlets that emerged after '89, which basically right now has converged into the hands of about 4 people. And of course, transition has not been bad for everybody. There's a very important aspect that there's a couple of sectors which I think throughout the region have hugely benefited from the transition, and it worked very well for them. It's not about the rich, it's about the security sector. As you see here in Romania, from the all the public wages for public functionaries and public people employed by the state, 40% are going towards the security forces of the state apparatus. And we have 4 security services. Then there's the police. Then the gendarmerie. Then the communal police, which is an interesting institution. Then the army, and I'm very sure I missed about 10 other institutions, right? I put you just to compare the what is going on with the education and health, so you get the picture. Now, something very important, and I keep on bringing this up also about the aid industry and help from the West. And I think it's very important to emphasize and bring this back again and again and again, that this has been the history of the aid has not been any kind of Marshall Plan, and on the contrary, all the financial flow worked in a completely different sense after '89, from the west to the east. There were big sums which went from the west to the east, but the way they were channeled basically conformed to the ongoing financialization of capitalism. And you can say, this is the number, 10%, around 10%, it's actually a bit more apparently, has gone to aid grants, right? And the Marshall Plan actually was 90% aid grants. And the rest, the big chunk of this financial flow from the west to the east was export credits, loans, and debt relief. So basically pumping and re-pumping and giving life again to the financial circuit and to the links between the financial sectors in Eastern Europe and in the West. From those 10%, the majority, as you see, went for the consultants. The Polish invented right away that expression, the Marriott Brigade, for the cohorts flying, like Jeffrey Sachs and all the guys flying for a couple of days in the Marriott in Warsaw, appearing on television, having meetings with the ministers of economy, and basically explaining not the economy but the philosophy of that was needed. And there's another number that, as a philosopher, I like to show, which is the fact that, and this is something that was a little bit kept under the drawers because it had political implications. Romania lost about 3 million people this 20 years in this transition. It's if you put these numbers together with the production of poverty, you see a warlike situation. Yeah, it's 20 years in which there's a massive production of loss, if you want to put it this way. There are pyramids, whatever they call social pyramid. How is it called? That go for the distribution of this 3 million missing people, and most of them are, of course, the active workforce, which makes for a very difficult situation in which, from the rest of the people remaining, there's about 6 million. So from the 19 million, about 6 million actually working people, right? There is this children and pensioners, so it's getting more difficult. Now, of course, there is the argument that all these other people are actually didn't just die in a genocide, you know, but basically they are in Italy, Spain, working and sending money back. But that's a different story. I won't go into this one. So basically, that's the grand narrative, whatever, in which we could work with different people. That the transition can be understood not as much as an opening for a democratic opening and new opening of development and all that, as the return, a reintegration of the Eastern Bloc into the semi-periphery of global capitalism, and a renewed situation of dependency, right? Together with a new production, very importantly, a new production of racism and patriarchal normativity. Basically, a whole ideological production of grudges or resentments or rejection of any sort of radical change. However, we could also split this transition time in see it, you know, in from the point of view of resistances, and globally, of course, we have after Seattle the renewal of Western and global South resistance. And then from 2008, of course, the systemic crisis. Now, these are something that speaks a little bit to what also Sasha was talking, I think, because the political forces, no matter if they officially are liberals, social democrats, or nationalists, they all are united by this, let's put it, cultural ideologies, right? They've all been anti-communist, Eurocentric, and capitalist-centric, and there is no political representation thus far that goes outside these big lines, right? So each one have their own, actually. There are differences, of course, between the social democrats and the nationalists in the way they articulate these things, but they all do it. And this is the block, ideological block, that still is there, I guess. And there are many other, I guess, characteristics, but I like to draw attention to this one. And now, of course, there's been a lot of resistance. And from 2010 onwards, it broke into a social arena. And I think this is very important, that the centrist liberals and the trade unions, but I'm going to refer more to the centrist liberals, have turned slowly towards the left in the past 3 years. And so we have in Romania, in particular, this ongoing cause célèbre of the gold exploitation at Roșia Montană, on which there was an agreement signed already in '99 with a Canadian gold corporation. And from '99, actually, until the present, it has been the longest cause of protest and resistance and mobilization in Romania. And now it's brought together all kinds of people, which is very important, including at some point nostalgic nationalists, very close to some form of fascism, right? So it's not that this cause against the corporation worked as a uniting cause for a wider bloc of the left, but in itself, it was a mobilization that basically, in which you could foresee a lot of political developments. And of course, in 2011, all the popular movements erupted publicly at a scale unprecedented since '89. That's important to say. You had in Romania protests in 51 cities, and they started from an idea that touched on reproduction economy and a move to reform the health sector. And then it just quickly took an anti-systemic expression. Then there was a referendum, and this is where those numbers of the national census played a part. So basically, long story short, they organized this referendum asking, should President Băsescu stay in power or not? And as you see, 87%, more than 87% said go away. But they ruled out the result, saying that the referendum based on the population census from 99, only 49.6%, I think, voted. So they ruled it useless, the whole referendum. They only made public the numbers, the actual results of the 2011 census this year. So, and according to them, of course, it was the referendum was legal and all that. But as a result, the president is still in power, and but he gave the government has been taken over by an alliance between social democrats and liberals. And what we have right now, 16 October, just this week, is a sort of maybe a new development, which we have the very first strong rural protests, which just erupted in northwest Romania against fracking. People have blocked the road and stopped the drilling convoys. And there's a big solidarity protests that have been organized in Bucharest and in Cluj, apparently. These are some images from Siliștea. So people stopping the convoys. They set up camp. And then, of course, the closest cities sent the gendarmerie. They beat up a few old guys. And this is how it looked. So the question is if this is really a new development. It's the very first movement of that comes from the rural side, and this for the let's say left scene. This brings up precisely the issue of organization. Yeah, it's very easily possible to mobilize in big city and in big cities right now, and to, let's say, make a demo or bring people into a street. But having this connection with the rural side brings up other issues of organization and endurance. And so, just put here a couple of, well, very pompously named historical tasks, but actually they correspond to sometimes very banal practices, but I think are important. But a point of reaction of resistance is this: that well, in their own language, in the language of the protesters, basically these social revolts have taken the form of the people against the political class. And of course, the right has, that again is not a perfectly left slogan, because the right has immediately appropriated, I guess, this slogan and called for, all the political class indeed is corrupted, is because the communists have taken over, all the parties, and we have to get rid of them. It's still the communist disease that is alive like a zombie, and it's eating us. We still don't have what we need is a purer capitalism, and so on and so forth. But this is, nevertheless, the expression of an anti-systemic expression coming from the people, yeah? And there is no political correspondent to that expression in the formal electoral sphere, and this makes people think about what they're going to do. So that we had, ever since this phenomenon, various forms of, let's say, institutionalization, including attempts to make parties that are ongoing, let's put it this way, tentative, but more significantly, I think, were a series of individual crossovers. So individual people deciding to actually join a party, one of the big ones, or some of the small ones, and try to play the game for now in the conditions in which that are given. Others, we have a couple of cases, actually, it's not so many, people who focused on the local constituencies, trying to get into the municipal administration. One of them managed to do it. But these, I think, are some of the tasks that I'll stop here, and then we'll see if we can go further with more concrete stuff in the Q&A. And I'll just like to talk a little bit about this fourth point, talking about from the standpoint of resistance and not of domination. Because for a long time, let's say this left scene has been very much busy with understanding what was going on, relearning about capitalism, relearning about other things, and all these social events in the past 3 years have shifted, I think, a little bit the focal point, and I think it's needed right now to also organize from the standpoint of resistance, and to talk out from outside dependency and development. And something that needs to be said is that the very first, this is the historical case, that the very first anti-systemic forms of collective expression in this transition have come from the cultural sector. And I think there's a responsibility that comes with that. And part of it is that we need, in this process of organizing, that, okay, it's tentative, is at the beginning, it seeps through, as we listened to all the interventions today and yesterday. Part of, I think, our responsibility as culture workers is to organize the after protest, the moments after these big events, but also to organize the cultural memory, and namely to reclaim the historical past of real socialism, but integrated with our narratives, I presented you mine, yours are yours, our narratives of the transition. If we reclaim or make gestures of reclaiming the socialist past without integrating the transition, I think we're going to make we're basically cutting the branch under our feet.
Okay, thank you, Ovidiu. Very many interesting points raised. And I believe we will return to that in the discussion. But before that, Madlen, please. Thank you. Thank you, Madlen. Perfect timing. And so we have, now the question is, are we, Marko, are we going to postpone everything 15 minutes because of the delay?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So then we have 20 minutes for debates. And don't forget that we promised also to include the possibility to continue the discussions from the earlier panel. So who wants to go first? Vuk.
Yes, I have a question for Ovidiu about these gold mine protests. Could you tell us something more about how are they articulated? What are the words, the expressions, the aims of the protest? In a more general sense, and point B would be how are they articulated related to this whole ecological stuff? Are they against the fact that there is a foreign company coming to exploit their land at probably very low prices, etc., etc.? Or is it a more general protest against, so to speak, conditionally speaking, industrialization as such?
Okay.
Do we want to collect more questions?
Sure.
If there are any. If not, then Ovidiu can answer.
It's a very long story, given that the protest itself has been going on for so long. But basically, so there's very different ways in which the different parts are articulating, and there's the fact that it's an exploitation that was there from a long time, from the Roman time. And then it has been reopened in the 19th and then in the 20th century, and now it's like the fourth attempted life of this gold exploitation with the help of sulfuric acid. And so there's different strands of protests. You have, for instance, people who are protesting it based on nationalist ideas, saying that there's, ruins of the Roman case there. There's archaeological treasures that need to be protected. It's part of the national patrimony and national history. And so that's one strand. Then there's another strand, more purely ecological, arguing about the type of what implies reopening this exploitation. It implies making like a sulfuric, a lake of sulfuric acid, basically, and what the impact this will have on the local community. And this type of criticism has been now, as far as I can tell, also the one adopted by the liberals, who have gotten now close to the protests. And then there's another strand that is against the corporation, that expresses it in terms of the foreign corporation coming and basically paying politicians to get what they want. And then, and I guess the fifth strand would be the a sort of a general anti-capitalist protest, which I think it may be the smallest.
Jovica. And then Panagiotis has also. First Jovica. You go first.
So, you have some kind of a, let's say, green movement or some, I don't know, organizations that are involved in ecological problems. I don't know, green parties are pretty popular.
Well, first, there's a very powerful NGO movement, green NGO movement, and what needs to be said is that they've been very creative in and basically they've been the only ones enlarging the repertoire of protest in Romania in the past 10 years. They engaged in many different tactics, from occupying buildings to chains to protesting in the mass media. They developed it's their big contribution. And then in the political sphere, there were 3 green parties that never managed to get together. There was an attempt the last elections to form a sort of an alliance between the Greens that never succeeded. And the leader of that alliance, who was presidential candidate, now he's one of the guys who made that crossover. So right now he's in the Social Democrats, advocating for green causes and secular humanism.
Panagiotis also had a question. A comment.
It's more like a comment. I was thinking of both the discussion we had in the afternoon, all the open questions about left-wing organization building in the former Yugoslavia, and then these examples from Romania and Bulgaria that at least show that social antagonism can still have results, can still affect the political scene, can still shift the balance of forces even indirectly. I think that there are a couple of, and I was also thinking about the experience of the Greek revolutionary left in the 1980s, which was practically in shambles. Of course, the Communist Party and other parties were strong, but I was talking about what we now tend to call the anti-capitalist left, which was really small groups. I mean, in the dimensions discussed about crazy. I mean, if you had 50 members in the 1980s, you were a group. You could start thinking that you would be a party or something like that. So, and I was thinking that what gave us power back then was trying to find roots in movements, and I think this is the number one task. If there are movements, then there can still be a left, and movements arise. People have difficulties, people have grievances, people want collective rights to defend, and there are still collective rights, they're not being abolished administratively. So that's the first thing. You need movements, you need to have a base. You cannot have left-wing politics simply as advocacy of causes. You have to represent something. And also, if you start by that, this can also, and the second point I was thinking is that, I think the same goes for Greece also, you need a new version of front policies. That is, party building, let's play with words, today means front building. You cannot have a traditional mode of a group turning into an organization, turning into a party. You need to bring together different experiences, strategies, and sensitivities around perhaps basic, common aims, and without any to debate. And I think this is the only way. For example, go back again to the experience of Greece in the 1980s and early 1990s, the fact that we had both in the student movement and the trade union movement a tradition of collaboration between different revolutionary groups in common, let's say, unitary forms of participation, helped to create a material basis and common understanding for cooperation, a culture of comradeship, as opposed, for example, the Greek revolutionary left of the 1970s, where whatever group was more closely to you ideologically was also the biggest enemy. That's, for example, the story of Greek Maoism, and some sentences of Greek Trotsky. So I think these are common experiences, and I think that it's also interesting that since the end of the 2000s, it seems that there is a new protest cycle in various reforms all over, were done also all over the region, which is also something positive, and this means that despite the weight of actually existing neoliberalism in the region, new generations can more easily think of the grievances in terms of collective struggle, and practically this is, the aqua viva, the water of life for the left, traditionally, historically, and the only way to reinvent itself.
Thank you, Margaret, for the comment. You wanted to add something?
No, just that I think that was one of the main things that we learned with the Kirika that experience. That started with this idea of making it going, after the, let's say, blissful death of the Romanian indie media and the earlier anarcho communist and in other left independent scenes that were, sympathetic with the Western anti-globalization movements and inspired by them. The moral was autonomism has a limit, and so Kritika Talk started as an idea of Vasileanu to open towards the liberals, basically, to the center. So going into building non-traditional alliances, just opening up, and it was like a learning experience and a success, I think. So basically, I think this should remain for us at least a continuous principle of organization, just going for these alliances.
Maybe I can use the chance now to impose a subject. But you mentioned it already, left east, and I think that what I tried to say earlier in the introduction is basically, well, we had this very common situation that all of Eastern Europe was basically trying to escape its own past, or the shadow of its own past, and that all meant a very myopic perspective. So it's exclusive focus on the Western centers, be it politically, economically, culturally, whatnot. So the whole package, and a complete partial blindness to anything happening in the region or around us. So it was like almost this game where, as if one could really physically or economically, politically escape the destiny of the region by integrating, by being the first, to cross the line into Westernization, European normalization, so on and so on. And of course, this had devastating effects. This atomization of the region. And this made us also, this forced us, all of us, basically, to invent the wheel all by ourselves, with local efforts. While had there been some form of platform of communication, of simply gathering not only collective experiences but also initiating a process of discussion, I think much time and effort could have been saved, and so this is simply really for us. I think I can say this not only on behalf of myself, but as much as the Slovenian example of the IDS is for us, of course, a very interesting thing to follow. But I think that the left east, the potential, since you are the ones who started this, to really use this as an instrument to make the region not only a very abstract and vague concept, but make it come to life as a not to sound Habermasian, but as a form of public sphere of the region. We need a focal point of that sort. So this is not so much a request, not so much a question, but rather a request.
Yeah. One thing that needs to be said is that basically there's as opposed to other, let's say, regions, there is no institutional structure to talk about the former socialist bloc, except for the various museums of communism, which are museums of anti-communism spread throughout the former Eastern Bloc. So the mere existence of a platform, if not yet a big institution that speaks to this region, whatever you might call it, Eastern Europe, former socialist bloc, Balkans, you know, I think it's very important. It has all of a sudden it brings side effects.
You have to add.
Yeah, just want to remind what Stipe said, the request. My question would be also to you, Ovidiu. In your opinion, what kind of, I don't know, resources, infrastructure, what would you need to, let's say, fulfill something like this? Because I also think that it's of crucial importance, and this kind of communication should be established as soon as possible. And I mean, since I think, well, I don't know for sure, that you are the most serious, or maybe the only one, but the most serious, let's say, media like that. So, yeah, I think the question is, what do you think that you need? Because then it's going to be like a, I don't know, I'm going to shed some light on the problems that we all have.
Well, what I think we need, I do think we need, first of all, to think about, to put our thought in institutional building, not only in the vision, which is basically the only thing that I did in my presentation, talking about vision, but there is, first of all, the fact that we are all spread throughout the region. So we need regular meetings, face-to-face also. We cannot simply remain a journal, although this is the form that it has right now. It's just a journal.
An editorial.
And a group.
A mailing list of broader editorial boards, supervisory, you know, including all of the people interested here. That already would also, I think, improve.
There already is a list. It's a leftist. It's on the Google groups. It's a Google group for now.
When you have a lack of resources, the mailing list is the first thing to go.
Yeah, thus far, it's basically a part of the Kritika Tag website. So the next step is, as I said, to move it, to have it on its own website, independent website. There's also other ideas that basically, for instance, the need for a physical location also. And here views are very different, and this still needs to be discussed. For instance, one of the ideas that came up from all these attempts was what I talked about, the Subversive Forum, this idea of an institution, a sort of a house for all the independent groups, or not all, but that would could be called House of Eastern Europe or House of Balkans or whatever, a physical also place that could be created also with governmental support. Why not? But I think the problem that we are facing right now is that it's one similar to one that Kritika Tag may be facing, namely, you start like a platform of groups, and then you become a group. And at that moment, you're again one group amongst all the others. And so there's further division. So it's very difficult to maintain this openness. Yeah.
Well, let's end here, even though it's a bit ambiguous.
Yeah.
But the time demands it. So thank you both Ovidiu and Madlen. We'll now have Marco. How long?
15 minutes break.
15 minutes break. And then we continue with our last keynote lecture, Panagiotis Sotiris, on the situation in Greece. See you all here in 15 minutes.